In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the Chris Voss MasterClass to help you decide if it's right for you and if it's worth paying for. I'll be taking you inside the course lesson by lesson, so you'll know exactly what to expect, going through the pros and cons, what alternatives you might want to consider, who I think the class is for, as well as looking at how much it costs before finally arriving at the conclusion on whether it's worth it or not. I've included timestamps on the video and in the description, and so if there's a section you're particularly interested in seeing, feel free to hop to that. You'll also find a link to the Chris Voss Masterclass so you can check the latest price. And by way of introduction, my name's Finn and I'm the founder of Lenopoly. At Lenopoly, we complete online courses and leave honest reviews. So that is to say, I intend to be very critical to give you as accurate a picture as possible. And while overall, I think this is a great course, there are a few things I think you should be aware of before considering buying it. Now, before we dive into the content of the course, let's first talk about Chris Voss and Masterclass. There's a lot of hype surrounding Chris Voss and his Masterclass, and rightly so. Chris Voss worked for the FBI for over 20 years as a hostage negotiator. During that time, he was involved in over 150 life and death negotiations, which averages out to one every 2 months for over 2 decades. So you know he has a ton of experience negotiating at the highest possible stakes. And since then, he's become a New York Times bestseller with his book Never Split the Difference, CEO of the Black Swan Group, and guest lecturer at Harvard University. And if you don't know Masterclass yet, here's a quick overview. Launched in 2015, Masterclass is a platform that enables you to learn from the world's best. How it works is Masterclass recruits world-leading experts onto the platform to teach you what they know, whether it's cooking with Gordon Ramsay, music with Hans Zimmer, or tennis with Serena Williams. There's over 100 instructors on the platform and new ones are added each month. Now, Masterclass has a lot of potential, there's no denying that, but I would say that not all classes are equal, some are definitely better than others. So we'd always encourage you to consider reading or watching a review prior to purchasing so you're not disappointed. So let's dive into the Chris Voss Masterclass. The class is 3 hours long and is broken into 18 lessons, giving us an average lesson length of 10 minutes. And so there's plenty of content included, and the lesson length makes it easy to digest and refer back to. You'll also get a 14-page workbook, which contains summaries of the key lessons in the course. The class itself contains a carefully curated list of several negotiation techniques, footage from real-life hostage negotiations. These are definitely big selling points of the course, and I'm happy to say, for the most part, they live up to the expectation. And you also get a series of role plays. These serve to illustrate the concepts brought up and really help you understand and implement them in a way a book simply can't. Now, at a high level, the typical order of business is Voss introduces a technique, explains what it is, why it's effective, how and when to use it. This is then exemplified with either real-life footage from actual hostage negotiations or role plays. And also, Voss provides you with easy ways you can practice these techniques in low-stakes environments, which is definitely a nice touch. To give you an idea of what to expect, I'll do a brief lesson-by-lesson breakdown before summarising what you'll learn at the end of this section. Once you've purchased the masterclass, you'll see something like this. Lesson 1 kicks off with Voss explaining his philosophy and fundamentals when it comes to negotiation. Essentially, that's to see negotiation as a collaboration, with both sides tackling the same problem but from a different perspective. So you're actually problem solving with the other side to reach an outcome that's agreeable to the both of you. Following that, we move to mirroring and labeling. These are techniques to help you build rapport with the other side while gaining valuable insight into their motives. These techniques are very easy to implement, and from my experience practicing them, they're also effective, and to be honest, surprisingly simple. We then move into a role play where we see these being put into action. And again, this is where you really get separation from a book, as you're able to get a much better sense of how these techniques are used. This is followed by a lesson on mastering delivery, which is all about how to communicate your message with maximum effect. And then we get to our first case study, which is a bank robbery involving 3 hostages. And I have to say, this was incredible. Chris plays the footage of him negotiating with the kidnapper, and as it plays, he explains where he has used the techniques you've learnt so far, and tells you what he was thinking throughout. This was actually one of his first hostage negotiations, and one where he learned a lot. I really like that we get to hear an older, more experienced Chris Voss critiquing his younger self. It really helps you understand the inner workings of negotiation. And of course, the storytelling and cinematography in this lesson were like watching a Hollywood film. From there, we go into a lesson on body language and speech patterns. To be completely honest, if you're familiar with the nuances of body language, you may not learn that much here. However, it is still useful to get the lessons in the context of negotiation. Creating the illusion of control is one of my favourite lessons. I won't give the game away here, but I will say this lesson flies in the face of conventional wisdom and gives you some very actionable guidelines. The next several lessons deal with techniques to diffuse tension, gain empathy, and take advantages of quirks in human psychology. You'll also learn a very helpful technique to use when bargaining. And throughout these lessons, you'll see a couple of negotiation mock-ups, including one on how to negotiate your salary, as well as how to negotiate a late checkout at a hotel, both of which I'm sure you'll agree are very practical and useful. And of course, you'll also see more real-life examples. The second to last lesson goes through the scenario 60 seconds or she dies. Just take a moment and think what you'd do if you had a madman say that to you right now. What would you do? Learning how to deal with a situation like this will make almost any other negotiation scenario a walk in the park. The very last lesson is all about the power of negotiation. I don't want to ruin anything about this lesson for you, so I'll simply say it's a powerful lesson that illustrates how by developing the skills taught, you can get more out of life. So to recap, this is what you can expect to learn from this masterclass. The tactics Voss has used in over 150 life and death negotiations. How to achieve your goals through collaboration, not opposition. How to frame questions that shape the other side's thinking. Tips for building rapport and creating trust-based influence. How you can read body language and speech patterns. How to respond to different situations effectively, as well as practical tips to negotiate your salary, a late checkout, or respond to a life or death threat. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the pros and cons. There are many advantages of the Chris Voss Masterclass, but for the purposes of this review, I'm going to focus on 5. First has to be the techniques themselves. You're getting a carefully curated list of tried and tested techniques. You should have the confidence to know that they really work. For me, the techniques were always going to be the make or break of this course, because ultimately, those are the things that will really drive the impact. Second, the examples. You're getting real life footage, role plays, and personal anecdotes from Chris. These illustrate concepts taught and really help you remember the key lessons. For me personally, I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall in a high stakes negotiation, and you get close with this course. Next has to be learning from Chris Voss. As mentioned, he's extremely qualified to teach this class, and it's rare you get the opportunity of having 3 hours of video content with someone as high caliber as Voss. He's also a great teacher. Another key advantage is that the course itself is very well structured. Each technique you learn builds on the next. They're all connected, and you can see how using a combination of all of them can really put the odds in your favour. Last but not least, the community. Now I have to say, I'm a cynic when it comes to communities with online courses. I just care about what I will practically learn. However, the community with this class is active, and people share tips, and you can do mock negotiations with one another. If that's your cup of tea, great. If not, there's plenty in the course to be getting on with on a very practical level. Now with the Chris Voss Masterclass, there are 3 key cons that come to mind. First, the workbook which comes with the course doesn't provide much value. Now, I didn't take this course for the workbook, so for me, that's okay. However, this one was only 14 pages, whereas usually they are double that in length and provide a lot more value. Next, I would have loved even more real life footage. The real life examples were an absolute strength of this course, so much so it would have been great to have more of them. The roleplays were good, but they suffered in comparison. They illustrated the concepts very well and are a great addition to the course, but as you might expect, a roleplay is never going to be as dynamic as real life. Now no doubt there's very good reasons as to why more real life footage couldn't have been included, and so to an extent, this is understandable. Last point for the cons is that the course lacks detail on how to prepare for a negotiation. Knowing what to do in advance of a negotiation is a key element of success, as is knowing how to assess at what point you should be walking away. Now obviously there is a limit to what can be put into the class itself, and this is where the workbooks usually are helpful. Masterclass missed an opportunity here to elaborate on these key points and provide resources for further learning in what was a rather slim and disappointing volume. Now I do suggest some alternatives you might want to consider in the "Is there anything better" section. So these are my thoughts. Overall, I feel that the pros do outweigh the cons. And actually, having read several other reviews and watched other videos as well, this review is probably the most critical and objective. A lot of people really like the course, saying, Chris Voss is the Chuck Norris of negotiation. I've watched all the videos from this masterclass and it is worth the price. Voss is authentic, knowledgeable and practical. You will get value. I just finished this masterclass and I really loved it. I find what he teaches has a practical application in every area of your life where you interact with people. Now, the main negative that is mentioned, which I didn't cover, is that a lot of the material Voss covers is similar to his book, Never Split the Difference. Just looking at it, it looks like he is going through his book, which is a great segue to the next section of this review. Is the content unique? And honestly, the answer is no. Not all of the techniques are unique to this course. There is overlap with Chris's book, Never Split the Difference. And by no means am I a negotiation expert, but I have read a lot of books, and while some of the techniques Voss taught were new to me, others I had heard before. That being said, the real value here is that Masterclass has packaged the best techniques into one easily accessible class. The real life footage and the role plays are also unique, and overall the course itself is intense, visual, and engaging in a way that a book simply can't be. I came across a point on Reddit highlighting this, which said, we have seen all of his YouTube, subscribed to the Black Swan emails, and have read his books, and there are some important pieces that are just better to watch. He does go over all the points in his book, but you get to actually see and hear him use these techniques. It is so helpful to hear him ask questions out of genuine curiosity. Hearing his intonation made a world of difference to understanding his techniques. At the end of the day, it comes down to how serious you are about improving your skills and taking advantage of this course and what it has to offer. Plus, I'm giving you this from the perspective of someone who has read a ton of negotiation books before. If you haven't, and you're fairly new to this, there's no doubt you're going to be learning a lot. And in fact, it's going to be a fast track education in the very best techniques. If you are interested in alternatives, then let me break them down for you. Books I've read and can personally vouch for include Negotiation Genius, by far one of the best single resources on negotiation that I've come across. It's great in breadth and depth of subjects covered. Next is Crucial Conversations. Now this may come as a shock, being placed number 2 on the list, given it's missing the word negotiation from the title, but it's a really comprehensive guide to having important conversations, and I think about the lessons close to every day. Secrets of Power Negotiating is next. Now this one's not as broad as number 1 on the list, nor is it as detailed as number 2. However, there's lots of tactics and techniques which make it a worthwhile read. Influence. This one is a bit more about the science of influence rather than a series of easy to implement techniques. That being said, it's very useful background reading and consistently tops lists as being one of the best business books out there. Then of course you have Chris Voss's own book, Never Split the Difference. I've included links in the description if you're interested to know more. Nevertheless, I'd say that the Chris Voss Masterclass provides value beyond what these books can offer when it comes down to really strong focus on the most effective tactics backed up with actual real life examples. Plus, if you buy the Masterclass, then you'll have access to all of the other courses. Now, there are a handful in the business section, but one I want to draw your attention to in particular is the Daniel Pink Masterclass, which is really a great complement to Voss's. While Voss goes deep on several negotiation tactics, Pink is very broad on persuasion and selling, and overall really adds to your skill set. Now in terms of who this course is for, I think it has a wide range of appeal as we'd all benefit from better negotiation skills, and most people recognise that it is an important skill to develop. That said, it's especially relevant for someone who is serious about improving their skills, wants to carefully create a list of tried and tested techniques, and wants to build rapport and trust-based influence. Now in terms of experience level, what I would say is that beginners and intermediates will benefit most from this course. However, I do think there is something for even expert negotiators, even if it's just to see the real life footage and hear Chris Voss narrate over it and get his perspective. Now moving into cost. I would preface this by saying to check the link in the description to get the latest price, and that's because the price and purchase options are subject to change, and it also depends on which currency you're purchasing in. But to break it down for you as it is today, so you can see how it works, at present it costs $180 for an all access pass. I wouldn't be surprised if that price has gone up when you watch this because of the amount of value Masterclass deliver. Now, with an all access pass, you can take any or all of the 100 plus courses on Masterclass. And the great thing about this offering is that the more classes you take, the less the effective cost per class is. Now, The way you work this out is to take the current cost of an all access pass, in this case $180, and then divide it by the number of courses you think you might take. For example, if you're able to find at least 4 to 6 classes, it means you're effectively paying between $30 and $45 per course. Now, bearing in mind that these classes are taught by world experts, the value is simply unbeatable, and this is a way you can sort of hack learning by being taught by the very best. So overall, I would say it's definitely worth exploring the platform to see if there's others you can find that you'd like. Okay, so now for the conclusion. Is the Chris Voss Masterclass worth it? Ultimately, this is something you need to decide for yourself. Do you like what you've heard so far? Are the cons and deal breakers for you? Are you interested in learning what this course teaches? But in my view, the Chris Voss class is well worth the investment. While it's not without its flaws, the techniques taught and the examples provided deliver a lot of value. At the end of the day, Voss is extremely qualified to teach this class, and hearing his perspective alone makes it worth it. And if you think about it, if you successfully apply the techniques taught, the chances are this course is going to pay for itself and more. It's also worth exploring other courses on the platform, as with an all access pass, you can take as many as you'd like. And if you're interested in the Chris Voss class, like I said, I can highly recommend Daniel Pink's, which is very complimentary to this one. Masterclass also has a refund policy, which removes the risk of you losing out if you don't enjoy it. So if you're serious about improving your skills, then I'd suggest you really consider this class. Finally, you can find all the relevant links in the description, and if you found the information in this video helpful at all, then please hit the like button to let me know. As some of you may have noticed, this is my first ever YouTube video, and so I'd really appreciate your feedback. Thanks for watching.